Hey guys, Preston here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be doing the Clemson versus Notre Dame football preview for the matchup that takes place tomorrow night in prime time on NBC. For my YouTube audience here, I already explained on my podcast platform. I have a podcast platform now. I've realized that my previews and my post games and a lot of the content I make tends to be more long form, like 30 plus minutes, and I talk a lot about sports and what's been going on. So I figured I would also put this on the podcast platform I have established. It is the KMA Sports Show. I'm going to link it in the description if you want to follow that and keep tabs on that. If there's ever a time you can't watch the YouTube video or you just prefer audio versions, I'm probably going to do some exclusive podcast stuff over there too, if anyone is interested. Now that I got that covered for both sides, we're going to go into the actual preview like normal. So first off, I'm rocking the Notre Dame hoodie today. Don't got the jersey on. Hat too. I think this is no surprise for Notre Dame fans. This is our biggest game of the year. Obviously, it's huge and of utmost importance for our season. Notre Dame, we've been a team on the edge of greatness for a while now, and it's games like this that we keep falling short on that are holding us back, you know. Looking at some betting odds and stuff like that, ESPN's Football Power Index only gives Notre Dame, I'm a Notre Dame fan for the podcast platform, just so everyone knows, so I'm a little biased, obviously, but that's okay. They only give us a 34.2% chance to win this game, which is a little lower than I thought. Clemson's about 5.5. They're 5.5 point favorites. That's with the people out of the game that obviously we will talk about. Those are kind of key matchups there. I expect this game to be a good one. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the last matchup. If anyone doesn't remember, Notre Dame and Clemson met in the 2018 playoff, where Clemson won 33-3, I believe. Obviously, Notre Dame has been taking crap for that loss ever since. But I think people tend to forget, though, that same playoff in the championship, they actually steamrolled Alabama and beat them by more points than they beat Notre Dame. So, you know, maybe the talent gap isn't as bad as people think, and they just overlook that convenient fact that Clemson steamrolled Alabama too that year. Little rant from the Notre Dame fan, but I do think we could win this game. I genuinely believe that. I think this is a team that's talented enough in the spots that matter most, the run game, the offensive and defensive lines. I really think we can get it done. Obviously, we'll have some help this game. This won't be a Clemson at full strength, if anyone's not aware. Trevor Lawrence has to sit out this game due to his COVID test, his COVID positive. They'll also be without two starting linebackers, I believe, due to injury, which is obviously a big blow for their defense, as you could imagine. This should be a tough matchup. I think, obviously, the injuries on Clemson's side lean in Notre Dame's favor, but I don't want people to forget that Notre Dame has also had plenty of injuries, the biggest ones being the fact their two best wide receivers are not able to play in this game. Kevin Austin was lost for the season again with a re-aggravated foot injury, and Braden Lenzy, our speed demon, is in the process of missing like 3 to 4 weeks, I believe is what it was, for his re-aggravated hamstring issues. So neither team's fully at 100%. Obviously, you would say the Clemson ones are more immediate and haven't been dealt with yet. Notre Dame's already played without those two wide receivers. So I guess if we're gonna look at some team stats here, get a broad perspective. Obviously, Clemson's offense has been more explosive than Notre Dame's, averaging 46.1 points per game compared to Notre Dame's 34.8. Notre Dame's offense has been its weak point this year. It's beyond obvious that is the case. There's been multiple times they haven't performed to what you would hope, not putting up crazy numbers. They're getting the job done. They run the ball well, and it's a very defensive-minded approach. It's like the Notre Dame 2012 team, you would say. Defensively, though, Notre Dame's defense statistically is actually better than Clemson's. Clemson's given up 15.6. If you want to round up, it's like 16 points per game, which is obviously still good. But Notre Dame's given up just over 10 at 10.3 points per game. Very solid right there. Both defenses are good, but with the injuries to Clemson's, I think that probably hurts them a little bit more than Notre Dame's. Notre Dame will also be without Maris Lufal, one of the rotational linebackers, for the first half of the game due to a targeting call against Georgia Tech. But if I'm being honest, as a Notre Dame fan, he's not like a star on that defense. And like I told you, he was kind of rotating snaps anyways, so it should be a loss Notre Dame could sustain for that half. If we're looking off just our last performances, we've had one game to go off of without a Trevor Lawrence-led Clemson team, and they were still able to put up 34 points, so that's good. I think that is their lowest total of the year, but that's still a good amount against an ACC opponent. Obviously, Boston College's defense isn't fantastic, but it's not I mean, it's not horrible. There's definitely been worse ones. And Notre Dame put up 31 points in a decent big win to Georgia Tech, but obviously Georgia Tech's defense isn't that great. And only 31 you could probably consider a little moderate or underwhelming. So something to keep an eye on there. If we're looking at the biggest matchups, to me, it boils down to Clemson's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. That is the biggest matchup of this game. I think Notre Dame offense will probably still struggle to move the ball well and probably won't put up a lot of points. I think the best chance Notre Dame has of winning this game is making it a low-scoring, tight affair, and the defense has to be disruptive. Getting sacks, maybe some turnovers, put some pressure on the young kid who's obviously a beast. So I don't want to hear crap from Clemson fans. He was the number one quarterback in your class, a beyond high 5-star with a crap ton of talent and potential. And so you're not at some crazy disadvantage with Lawrence out, if you ask me. It's not like, let's be honest, your backup is probably better than Ian Book. So, let's just take that into account. So it's still something Notre Dame's defense will have to worry about. This isn't like they got a backup in, let's kill them. This isn't the same as like the NFL drop-off in talent. These kids are behind. Sometimes the backups behind these other starters are legit talents who are just waiting for their turn. And it just happens to be that DJ's getting his early now due to Trevor having COVID. Obviously, it's good for the freshman QB that he had a game under his belt already to maybe shake some of his mistakes off in his rest. We'll see how Clemson prepares for that. Obviously, they're a very well-coached team, and I definitely have all faith in Dabo Swinney that he will put up a big fight in this game. Obviously, I'm probably biased when I say I think Notre Dame will win. But, I mean, to me, it's got to be close at the very least. I think it will be close to, like maybe one of those Georgia games Notre Dame's had a couple times where they come close to winning. Even if they don't get it done, it should be a close affair if you ask me. Sorry, YouTube fans, I'm rocking back and forth. I don't know why. Nerves, I guess, right? Let's see. What else can we look at here? Rushing-wise, Notre Dame's rush yards per game is surprisingly way higher than Clemson's at 231 yards per game compared to 166. But we all know that Travis Etienne is no joke. He's a very talented kid. I do want to give Kyron Williams from Notre Dame some respect. If you're a Clemson fan or someone who doesn't really pay attention to either team watching this, Kyron Williams only has 6 less yards than Travis Etienne has. The kid's been beasting for Notre Dame all year, and he's been sharing carries. I mean, he's gotten the bulk, but he's been sharing and splitting carries all year with other kids in Saborius Flemister and Chris Tyree, including the fact that Williams basically took off the USF game. But I digress. Both very good running backs, but obviously Etienne's the more immediate talent. He's had more years to develop, and he's a surefire first or second round draft pick. So I have a feeling that we'll probably rely on him heavily this game. Clemson's receivers have been decent. I mean, Amari Rodgers already has 586 yards and 6 touchdowns, but they're not the same unit they were last season. There's not quite as much talent. And when you got a backup, a young stud, but he's only played one game, your run game is probably something you want to get going more than maybe you would if you had Trevor Lawrence in and you could air it out if you felt like it. So look for Etienne. That's going to be a big matchup. This Notre Dame run defense has done decent, giving up 93.7 yards per game, which is better than what Clemson's has done. But it's still obviously not an easy task. This will be the best running back Notre Dame has faced by far, and it's going to be up to guys like Kyle Hamilton and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, both kids who will be NFL stars one day, to make plays and shut down Travis Etienne. I think our D-line, Notre Dame's D-line, has done very well this year. I think for the most part they get pressure. There's a lot of experience in that D-line. The 2 starters are fifth-year seniors, and behind them are young studs like Isaiah Foskey, who is a redshirt freshman, I believe, who was leading the team in sacks and might still be. I think we can get pressure. Clemson's offensive line is pretty solid, but I still think it's a matchup we need to exploit if we want a chance. And if we can put some pressure on the young quarterback, it would go a long way. If we're looking at a matchup in terms of that, like I said, I do think Notre Dame's defensive line can get it done. The big test will be Notre Dame's offensive line it's had some moments so far this year, like giving up 4 sacks against Louisville, which is just unacceptable. They looked a little better last week, and I think this is obviously the biggest matchup of the year for them in this offensive line based off what we've heard and what we expect from them. One of the most experienced offensive lines in football, been ranked like the top offensive line in college by Pro Football Focus most of the weeks already. This is a matchup they need to win. I believe Clemson will be without one of their best defensive linemen for the first half due to a targeting call 2. And it's just a matchup we have to take advantage of. Clemson's D-line is legit, but from what I've heard, they're pretty young. And Notre Dame needs to win these trenches. In most games, winning the trenches is a recipe for success, and we know this. And I think this is one of the few times where Notre Dame is almost uniquely capable of challenging some good teams in the trenches. I feel like that offensive line is capable of competing against anyone, and that defensive line should be able to get pressure on almost all teams. So those are huge matchups to look at. Obviously, this game's harder to make projections on, guys, if I'm being honest. It's two top teams. There hasn't been a point like that for Notre Dame yet this year. Same with Clemson. I mean, maybe some people thought Miami would do something, but I always felt they were kind of overhyped against Clemson. Notre Dame does not play them this year. But you know what I mean? This is like a legit matchup that's about to go down. I have a feeling both teams will be motivated. It's in Notre Dame, so that's a slight advantage for the Irish. Obviously not as big as it would have been if we got to keep our regular season and we got to play them in front of 80,000 Irish fans. This time it'll be about 5,000 Irish fans, but they still have to travel up to Indiana, and maybe that's just another factor that could help lean towards Notre Dame's advantage. All right, now let's get into some individual impact players here. I think that's something we want to look at. Sorry, guys. Let's look at Clemson's roster and what they've been doing so far this year. There's always a little downtime when the internet wants to go slow on you. Well, real quick, let's talk about the quarterbacks. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is out, so that means they'll be relying on DJ to play this game, and he was 42 of 60 for 444 yards and a 70% completion percentage of the year. Obviously, I don't think he threw 60 attempts last game, so I think he's also gotten playing time in the Clemson blowouts, which, I mean, there's been plenty of them. So, he got some reps that way too. Hasn't turned the ball over yet, so 444 yards with the 70% completion percentage, which is impressive. That's a good percentage right there. 2 touchdowns and no picks, and has been sacked 1 time. Trevor was sacked 8 times in the games he had. So that, to me, that shows that we can get to the quarterback. If Lawrence was sacked 8 times in the 6 or 7 games, it's been sacked on average at least like once a game or something. I'm not doing math, but hey, we can get to him. I think we have a good chance of actually getting some pressure on DJ. Obviously, he's a mobile kid. I mean, that's something we have to adjust for and look out for, because Florida State's quarterback actually took advantage of our defense a little bit at times due to his mobility. That was also the game we came off COVID, so I want to dismiss that a little bit with the fact that we had kids who literally couldn't practice until like the day before the game happened. I think we're better than that now. That's obviously, but it will be a big matchup, a mobile quarterback with a good arm. Like I said, this kid's talented. He's super impressive. It's not an easier matchup. It's maybe debatably slightly easier, obviously, because Lawrence is Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be the first overall pick. But this DJ kid is special, and he will be an NFL quarterback too. I mean, that's almost guaranteed at this point. So I already mentioned the running game with ETN obviously being their lead back. No one else on the team has over 100 yards rushing. They get some other kids involved every now and then, but no one's near ETN's level. And the fact ETN also averages almost 6 yards per carry. Like I said, he's their biggest impact player for this game. We will get to some of these. I'll name specific impact players in the video as well. Receiving-wise, these kids have done a little better than I thought. ETN is their second leading receiver, so look for that to be something they try to do a lot, and we need to be able to shut down. Obviously, especially with your backup quarterback, the unexperienced kid, you always short passes and plays the running backs and stuff just happen, and it's a good play designed for teams when they have their backup, and it's fairly obvious. That's what the Steelers did last year with Devlin Hodges and Mason Rudolph. So expect ETN to get some catches out of the backfield, and it's our job to have to bring him down and wrap him up like we're supposed to. So Amari Rodgers has 586 yards and 40 receptions and 6 touchdowns. So he has been beasting out for him this year. He's really stepped up to his potential and played well in that number 1 role. Their second leading receiver has 272 yards. So not horrible, but obviously not as talented as I'm sorry, guys. I forget the name of the kid that they had who had to sit out the year due to unfortunate discovered health problems he has. Hopefully you'll let me know in the comments his name. I feel bad I forgot him, but obviously, like I said, he wasn't able to play at all this year, and that put a damper in their wide receiver core to begin the year with in general. So to me, if we're talking about impact players there, Clemson's impact player on offense for me is ETN because he's a passing and a rushing threat. He's their best player on offense right now, if you ask me, especially with Trevor out. And they will probably use him in creative ways and get him involved a lot because they have a young quarterback playing the game. Now, kicking-wise, let's see how good they've been. Their kicker has missed one extra point attempt this year. They actually have 3 different people who've tried extra points. That's a little odd to me. I'm not quite sure the situation there. And their kicker has also missed 4 field goals, so maybe that's something to keep an eye out for. Not a great track record. That seems like a bit too many missed for my personal comfort if I was a Clemson fan. So maybe that's something to take and keep your eye on. Defensively, I think some of these guys are out, unfortunately for them, so I don't really remember who's out and who's not. There's a lot of turnaround on this defense. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I haven't watched a lot of Clemson this year, so I don't know all their defenders. I think most of them are young, and not a lot of guys have stuck out quite yet, like, the Dexter Lawrences or the Isaiah Simmons of the past, where they're going to be a first-round talent. But it's Clemson, so these are young 4- and 5-star kids, obviously. Very few 3-stars on that roster, and they all have a lot of potential and talent that they continue to grow week in and week out. Their leading tackler at the moment is Balin Spector, so let's see if he gets to make an impact at all this game. Clemson players out. Sorry, I want to Google who they say is out. Defensive tackle Tyree Davis, linebacker James Sklowski, linebacker Mike Jones Jr., and Trevor Lawrence are all inactive. So it looks like Spector will still be playing, and he appears to be he's their leading tackler, so that's probably good for them to keep having around. In terms of sacks, Myles Murphy leads their team with 3.5 sacks, but like I said, they get good pressure. They have a lot of guys with sacks. They rotate them because, they're big up in games. So this depth is legit for this Clemson team. Brian Brees and Myles Murphy both have 3+ sacks. So obviously that's something huge. Tyler Davis, the defensive tackle that's out, has 1 sack, but he also has... It's got to have TFLs or something that aren't on these Notre Dame on these stats. But like I said, the defense is legit regardless. They struggled a little bit last week, which is something good to see for Notre Dame fans. Makes you think maybe we can take advantage of some of this stuff. Specifically, their secondary did not look fantastic against that Boston College team, who is decent at throwing the ball, but obviously, to me, they're not world beaters. Safety Nolan Turner, who appears will be playing, to me, is probably the guy we want to look out for. These are pretty impressive numbers from the safety position. He has 21 tackles and 3 interceptions already on the year. They have multiple kids with 1 interception, a lot of the corners. So they force turnovers on defense, which is obviously something you want to keep an eye out for. The matchups as tight as this, you do not want to turn the ball over, and that's something Notre Dame needs to hone in on, and they can't make any big mistakes like that tomorrow night. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the safety with 3 picks. Nolan Turner is my impact player because, their backup linebackers are who you want to keep an eye on, though, for sure. I think them having 2 linebackers out is something that Notre Dame can hopefully take advantage of because, like I mentioned earlier, and based off stats, Notre Dame is a run-first offense averaging 230 rush yards per game. And if they can get that going against this Clemson defense, who's obviously missing some people in the linebacker position where the run game is really important, that would be huge for Notre Dame in terms of keeping time of possession, keeping the ball away from that Clemson offense and putting points on the board. It'd be huge for us. So, yes, the run game is vital for both teams this game, if you ask me, and might come down to just who does better at running the ball, which obviously is usually a case for a lot of games. So, something to keep an eye out for. Now, if we're going to the Notre Dame players, for anyone who doesn't know much about Notre Dame or just in general, we can check in. I haven't actually got to check in on the stats of Notre Dame guys in a while, so it'll be good to see what they are up to. Especially this receiving core, like I mentioned, has been struggling a lot so far this year. So if we go to our statistics on this team, sorry guys, it's being dumb for some reason. Doesn't like me. There we go. Notre Dame statistics. Okay, here we go. So, as I mentioned, the top thing to look at is our run game, where we have multiple running backs who have put up decent numbers so far this year. We have 3 different running backs who are averaging more than 4 yards per carry. You have Kyron Williams, the lead back I already talked a little bit about, who's very talented and kind of underrated, only a redshirt freshman. He has 600 yards on the year with 5.7 yards per carry and 7 touchdowns. That's going to be a key thing. He can't turn the ball over. He had a fumble last week, so he can't do that. But if he can get the run game going and make plays against this Clemson defense, it will indeed go a long way for us. Behind him, the other kid getting a decent amount of carries is true freshman and very high 4-star, was the number 1 ranked all-purpose back out of college in the 2020 recruiting class, is Tyree. He's a speed kid, has 264 yards on only 40 attempts, averaging 6.6 yards per carry. Very solid numbers by the kid. He's actually has the best yards per carry out of any of the running backs. 2 touchdowns already. Look for him to probably get involved in games like this. Speed does matter, and Notre Dame's finally starting to get some speedier guys. Notably, like I said, Tyree is a freshman and has elite top-end speed, so maybe we'll get him involved, see if he can make some plays on the outside against this Clemson defense. The other running back getting a decent amount of carries is Saborius Flemister, SIBO, with 42 carries and 235 yards, averaging 5.6. I'm not sure how I would describe SIBO. He's kind of like a weird combination. He can be physical, and he's also got some speed still, so he works out well. He's just a nice extra back to have in there in a rotation if you can use him, and he's made the most of his opportunities. 5.6 yards per carry is pretty good, especially since a lot of the times when he's playing, teams know we're going to run the ball because the game's already out of hand for them, and that's when SIBO gets his playing time. So maybe look for him. If guys get gassed or something like that, keeping a rotation, keeping guys fresh is probably going to be an advantage in the long run, and so we'll see if he can do anything when it comes to stuff like that. Receiving-wise, obviously Clemson has the advantage. I mean, their top receiver has the same receiving yards as like our top 3 receiving players. The receiving game has not been something that Notre Dame's even used a lot this year. Granted, they haven't had to because they're running so well, but it would obviously be an advantage if they could flush out the passing game. Their leading receiver is McKinley with 14 receptions for 264 yards. He appears to be our wide receiver 1 coming into this game, but I think our biggest receiving threats are the tight ends, including true freshman tight end Michael Mayer, a 5-star who is, I believe, the number 2 tight end in the entire class of 2020, has 168 yards and 15 catches and 2 touchdowns already on the year. His role is just continuing to grow as he's, at least last game, he took over and got the bulk share of snaps from tight end Tommy Tremble, who actually had a good game against Georgia last year. Skaronik and McKinley are our outside receivers. They are both pretty tall. They're grad guys, so they've been playing football for a long time, and they're finally starting to get it going again. Hopefully, if they can use their size as an advantage this game, it'd be huge for us. Like I said, the pass game hasn't really been there, but them physically, they have the traits where they could probably make some plays on these Clemson corners who've been decent, but they're not world beaters. They're not, as good as what Clemson's had before. But to me, those tight end matchups are huge, especially when they have linebackers out already. And we run a lot of 2 tight end sets, so look for Michael Mayer and Tommy Tremble, who I mentioned already, to be probably our main receiving weapons this game. And we could also get a running back involved, similar to what Clemson does. Kyron Williams is actually our second leading receiver with 180 yards. We might get him involved in maybe screen games or some outside stuff, so look out for that. Other receivers, it's kind of a hodgepodge. Avery Davis has been playing in the slot. He's continued to improve week in and week out. He's a kid that Notre Dame initially recruited as a quarterback like 4 years ago, and he's been on so many different positions. He's finally able to settle in at the slot wide receiver, and this is his first full year really playing that position, so he's just continuing to improve and learn that position each week. Wilkins Jr. is a wide receiver who also would probably play on the outside if we rotate him in at all. He had his first touchdown pass for the Irish last week. So maybe he'd get involved a bit more. We shall see. And outside of that, the Lawrence Keys and 2 other tight ends, and Kevin Bauman and George Takis, are there. They all have registered 1 catch, but haven't been used a lot so far this year. We will see what happens. There's also a high 4-star who was a 5-star for a little bit, number 6 wide receiver in the 2020 class, in Jordan Johnson, who Notre Dame fans like me have been clamoring to see play all year. He still hasn't really seen the field. There's been some conspiracy theories that maybe we were holding him out to use him against Clemson so they wouldn't have tape. I hope that's the case. I doubt it, just how Brian Kelly is. Dude's stubborn sometimes with giving young kids playing time. And I'm not sure. Maybe there's some more going on behind the scenes between him and the young wide receiver. But I would be ecstatic if he got some playing time because I really think he's talented. And with a struggling wide receiver room, he can make all the difference. So that's the offense to me. I think we're going very similar than what I did with Clemson. The impact player on offense will indeed be Kyron Williams. Just like with ETN being Clemson's, I think the run game will be very pivotal in this matchup. And two of the best running backs in college at the moment are going to go against each other. And then defensively, kicking. Okay, real quick with kicking. Jonathan Dorr is Notre Dame's kicker. He's been pretty dependable for us all year. He's made all of his extra points, and he's missed 2 field goals. Sort of uncharacteristic from him. One was from 40 to 49 yards, the other from 30 to 39. So a little better than how Clemson's has fared, but I am pretty confident in Dorr as a kicker. I don't know, Clemson fans, are you confident in your kicker? I don't know enough for that, but I'm sure he's decent, right? It's Clemson. Defensively is where the big dogs come in for this Notre Dame team. This is where most of their talent is, specifically their 2 leading tacklers, and Kyle Hamilton, the safety. The freak safety at almost 6'4", I believe. He's a freak in nature. He should be used heavily in containing some of these guys. He might shadow ETN a lot this game, depending on if the corners can hold their own weight against some of these receivers, maybe. And Owusu Koramoah, obviously, to me, will also have a factor into this run game and can also bring some pass rushing skills. Both of those kids will be NFL players, almost guaranteed. The rest of it, I mentioned this D-line with Ade Ogundeji and Dalen Hayes. Dalen Hayes finally had his breakout game. We've been waiting for something from him for a little while now, and he ended up having 2 sacks and 2 forced fumbles last week against Georgia Tech. If we're talking just in terms of sacks, Notre Dame actually has similar stack numbers to Clemson with the fact they have 2 kids with 3 or more sacks. And Isaiah Foskey, who I mentioned he's pretty much solely a pass rusher. He's only on a rotational role, and he's still managed to get 3.5 sacks, which is impressive and good for the kid. He's been beasting for us. Freaking nature-ish, if you ask me. Ade Ogundeji, the 5th-year kid who got the comeback this year, has 3 sacks already on the year as well. And Dalen Hayes, like I mentioned, who was pretty quiet all year, burst onto the scene again last week, getting 2 sacks, putting him in 3rd place against Georgia Tech, along with 2 forced fumbles. Ovi Ogofufu has 1.5 sacks. German kid Alexander Eschenberger has a sack. A lot of other depth kind of guys getting sacks in there too. Including Owusu has a sack as well. And Tua's cousin, actually, of Myron Tungavailoa Amosa, also has a sack on the year. He will play a pivotal role. It probably won't show up in the stat sheet, but obviously his job is going to be to plug up that middle and make sure that Clemson cannot run the ball up the gut on us. So yes, let's see what else we can look at. If we're looking at pass deflections here, Nick Mcleod, the transfer corner, has had a pretty solid year for us. He has 5 pass deflections, passes defended, and an INT this year, so good job by him. Sean Crawford, sorry guys, my throat's like stupid dry for some reason. Sean Crawford, the 6-year kid, who's unfortunately had to deal with a lot of injuries in his career, moved from corner to strong safety, where he's had a pretty good role this year. 22 tackles, a sack, 3 pass defended, and an INT, and a fumble recovery. The second corner position will be rotated. It all depends on who probably plays better between Tariq Bracy, the junior, who has playing experience and has played pretty well, getting 3 pass deflections, along with Clarence Lewis, the true freshman, with 7 tackles and 3 pass defended on the year. So, yes, these corners are going to have an important job. Sorry, guys. These corners are going to have an important job against these Clemson wide receivers who aren't as talented as they have been in the past, but Amari Rodgers has shown that he's capable of being a number 1, and hopefully we can shut them down. I don't know if we'll double him to a point, but hopefully I think they would probably put Nick Mcleod on him and have him follow and see what he can do. I do like this defense a lot. That's what I mentioned. To me, their defense is better than Clemson's, which obviously not a lot of people can actually say that, but I genuinely believe that, and I think they can get it done. So now, if we're getting into impact players, this is a tough one for me. I think I'm going to go Kyle Hamilton just because his diverse skill set means he can be very valuable for us in coverage as well as shutting down the run game. And to me, he's more than capable of being able to tackle Travis Etienne in the open field, which is obviously not an easy task. I do think he is up for it, though. So, for coming to score predictions here as we hit the 30-minute mark on the video, this is tough. Most people are still pretty darn confident that Clemson's going to win. I think they're overlooking Notre Dame a little bit. Maybe not Clemson. themselves, but the media is. I want to make that clear. I think Dabo Swinney will have his kids ready to go, but I do think this is finally the time Notre Dame gets over the hump. I'm going to have them win in terms of college scores, a pretty low-scoring. Would it be low-scoring? A low-scoring game. I'm going to say they win 28-24. So just a 4-point win. I don't think Notre Dame would blow them out, and I don't think Clemson would get a blowout either. I think this game's close regardless, but I'm going to give the edge to Notre Dame. Obviously being a homer, but I do think if there was a time to beat Clemson, to be now. Obviously they're missing some guys due to COVID and injuries. They're not quite as good as they were last year, lost a lot of talent to the NFL, and Notre Dame's offensive line and defense just seems fit to make a decent run this year. The only thing holding them back to me is this passing game, and hopefully that isn't detrimental to the team this week. So either way, guys, thank you so much for watching and or listening if you're listening on my podcast platform. Let me know how you think this game will go, what your predictions are, if you think Notre Dame can get it done, or if I'm just crazy. Also, if you have impact players or anything you want to discuss with me in the comment section below the YouTube video, please feel free to. I love to talk with fans. Sports debate's always fun, and I have to make these videos with no co-host. So if I can debate you in the comment sections, I will more than be willing to do it. Once again, thank you so much for watching. This is for the YouTube fans. Click up here for my playlist on all my Notre Dame football videos, previews, and post games. Down here is where you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to hit 140 subs by the end of the year. It's growing so please hit that subscribe button or tell your friends to as well and make it be a huge deal for me. I'd love it a lot. Thank you so much. And over here is just a random YouTube video of mine that they have decided to recommend for you. Check the description of this YouTube video for the links to my podcast, the KMA Sports Show, out on multiple platforms, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. If you'd love to see some, I'm definitely going to make some exclusive content over there as well. And you can also, like I said, if you ever want to listen to these instead of watch them, you can go over to the podcast platform. All right, guys, this is KMA Preston signing out. Go Irish. Let's hope we beat Clemson, man. I'm pumped up. Let's go.